Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. And I'm here with Rob. Hi, Rob. So good to have you here.
Hi, Annie. It is so great to be here. I've watched so many of your podcasts, and like when guests come on, oftentimes I feel like they're just like glowing because they're so happy to be with you. So this is me glowing.
Oh, that's so awesome. So fun. So why don't you take us way back even to your childhood? Like where did your story with alcohol begin?
Absolutely. So I would say that for most of my life, I was what you'd call a normal drinker, right? So what do I mean by that? I drank for social occasions. I drank to party. I drank at concerts, and I drank to have a good time. And absolutely, that meant that I drank way too much on way many an occasion, but it really wasn't a problem for me. So, and I'm really curious about that term normal drinking because, well, so I'm actually a fan of AA, and I do go to meetings every week, but I do have some fundamental differences with AA philosophy. And one of the ways I feel like the fact that the conversation's been driven towards this idea that there are normal drinkers and then there's the A word, right? Doesn't necessarily serve us, because I think there's a lot of normal drinkers who have an issue with drinking, but they can always kind of say, "Oh, but I'm not one of those people," right? So I think you even talk about like when your friend went to AA and you were still drinking, and then they came to you and said, "Oh no, I'm different than you," right? Which kept you from even looking at that point. So I don't think that really serves us. So this whole idea of normal drinking. But the other thing about that term normal drinker is, listen to it, like if you flip it around, it's like drinking is normal. And that was absolutely the case for me. I just assumed drinking would be a normal part of my life for my entire life. My parents were in no way classic problem drinkers, but my dad was a big wine collector, and he was really into that. And he was a food critic, and he among other things. But he even, I think I was 11. I remember he sat me at the dinner table, and I put 2 sips of wine. He's having a dinner party, two glasses of wine in front of me, and had me sip, and I could tell which one was the better vintage. And he thought that was just great, just bragging to how his son was
Party
really
trick. Was
well,
that the
yeah, like
first time you drank?
a connoisseur in me. Could well have been. The first time I got drunk, I was babysitting, probably around the same age, 12 maybe. I was babysitting at a neighbor's and invited the neighborhood, the boys over, and we hit the liquor cabinet. We drank rum straight out of the bottle. I got so wasted, and I threw up. I tried to make it to the back porch, but I vividly remember throwing up on the drapes, and then in my drunken state attempting to wipe it off, and I can't imagine I did a good job. But the odd thing about it was no one said anything. And I can't imagine they didn't notice. And it makes me again wonder, was it sort of like, oh, well, boys will be boys. This is a normal part of growing up. Or maybe I blocked it out. It could be trauma. I don't know. But I don't remember ever having it being brought up. That was the first time I remember getting drunk.
And do you remember
anyway,
liking it or not really?
Well, it ended up being a kind of a traumatic event. So it was full of stress. But I was also kind of blown away. I think it kind of scared me, honestly. It's like, wow, because it was really intense and powerful. I don't remember drinking again. I don't know when. I'm not sure when the next time I drank again. I don't have a clear memory of that. but it just was a ubiquitous part of my life, whether it was through high school or college or whatever. I just always assumed I'd have a life with alcohol, and I always assumed I'd be drinking at certain events and certain times. But it wasn't a problem. Like I liked bourbon, so I used to get one of those big, 1.75 bottles of bourbon, the big ones with the handle, and that would last me like months. So that wasn't like heavy drinking by any means. But in the last 8 years or so, my guardrails came off. Like I used to have guardrails. Like I never used to drink during the day. I usually drank on the weekends. I usually drank when I was going out. And if I was at home, I usually just had 1 or 2. But my guardrails came off, and so how did that happen? Well, let's just say the idea of drinking more was presented to me, the idea that I could take off my guardrails. And I think it's really important here to talk about responsibility, because what I would say is no matter what you may blame your drinking on, or what circumstance or what person or whatever, one thing I had to come to in my journey was to recognize that every time I took a drink to my lips, that was me. That was me doing it. It was my choice. It wasn't anybody making me do that. And why that's so important, responsibility, is that if I'm responsible, then I can make a choice, then I can do something about it. I'm the one with the power. And also, if I'm responsible, I can take responsibility for feeling all the feelings around it. I'm not putting anything outside of me on anyone else. Mm-hmm. But let's just say that definitely part of my story at the time was like, I'm being influenced in a certain way. I was feeling really disappointed. I was feeling disappointed in my marriage. I was feeling disappointed in my career. I was scared and I was in pain, and I didn't want people to see that. So I started to drink to kind of cover it and to numb it. And I started to drink more, and I started to drink heavily, and it became a problem. I developed a tolerance. And it's funny, like we talk about tolerance like it's a good thing, right? I mean, you also talk about that like early in your career when you're like, oh, I'm going to intentionally develop a tolerance. Tolerance is not a good thing. It's not, right? It's like your body's attempt to balance this incredibly imbalanced situation and to require more and more alcohol to get the same effect. And it just started to get really scary for me. I started to see personality changes. I also contracted Lyme's disease during this time, which had a co-infection, and one of the symptoms was actually rage, and alcohol really fueled that. So, I mean, I'm typically known as a pretty nice guy, but I started to have these fits of anger and rage that were just not me, and were really scary. It's like, who is this person? I'd never had that before. And then let's just say the embarrassing kind of moments started to increase, or bad, let's just call them bad outcomes, like, blackouts, difficulty standing up. Like there were a few times in public where I lost my balance. And, I live in a small town, it's intense fights with my spouse, just all these things that, Catherine Gray, who's an author, she wrote The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. I know you're a fan, and I am too, talks about rock bottom convincers. And, sometimes it's like, oh, I hit a rock bottom, but there are all these rock bottom convincers along the way for me, like just that said, this is just not the way you want to be living your life. This is really, really not good. But I would say my rock bottom convincers sort of culminated in December 2018, during the holiday season. So I have a daughter, and I love my daughter as much as it's possible to love another human being. And we have a great relationship, and we're very close. And I'd say developing a drinking problem is the worst thing I ever did as a parent. Not because I was mean to her, not because I did, it damaged our relationship in any way like that, but because I put her in really uncomfortable situations. And because also she was watching this thing happening to me that was so painful, and that she couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't do anything about it. Like that was just really, really hard. And so when my daughter would come home for visits, I tended to drink more because there was stress, some family dynamics stress. And so
was she at college at this time, or?
No, she's 29. She lives in New York area, but she'd be coming home to Virginia for visits. So I would tend to drink more during those times, and that didn't go well. There were some really uncomfortable times. So I promised her on December, that December, that I was going to be sober when she got home, and I was. I stopped drinking, and I was sober when she got home, and for 5 days I was sober, and it was really great, And then comes Christmas Eve, and she went to be with her mom to celebrate Christmas Eve. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have a glass of champagne, but no way was I going to stop at a glass of champagne. So the next day she came home for Christmas Day, and she walked in the house, and she took one look at me, and she said, "You're drunk. This sucks." And she went in her room and she shut the door. That was Christmas. The presents just sat there unopened, and that's just an example of a real rock bottom convincer. And one of the hardest things when I look back on my drinking, one of the hardest things for me is realizing that as much as I love her, as much pain as I was causing, and as much as she wanted me to stop, I couldn't. Like I wanted to, but I just couldn't. That was a terrible, terrible feeling. Anyway, things kind of deteriorated from there. Not so much between us, but I just kept drinking more. I wasn't sleeping. We had house guests, like overnight guests. And for so many of us who developed a heavy drinking issue, hiding is a big part of it, right? So I had bottles hidden all over, but it's really hard to hide when people are staying in the same house with you. And it was just very uncomfortable. And some of my guests were like, "Oh, you seem fine." I was like, "No, I'm not fine." And then, towards the end of the break, we had surprise family visit. And so it was about December 30th. And I literally put dinner in the oven, went to bed, and I didn't get back up. Like I couldn't greet them. I couldn't come to the table to sit for dinner. Like I was just an absolute wreck. And it was so, humiliating and so awful. I really liked these people. I wanted to spend time with them. So that was really, that was the low point for me. I had been searching for a solution for about 2 years. I'd been to 4 substance abuse therapists. I'd been to AA meetings. I'd, had conversations, but I was still drinking. And I went on Amazon because I thought if I could find a book that would explain some of what's going on chemically and biologically with me, maybe it would help. And that did end up being the case. Like it's helped me a lot to understand what alcohol does. So I was on Amazon and I'm reading a review of a book and it says, "This is a good book, but if you want to read a really good book, read Annie Grace's This Naked Mind." And I said, "Okay, I'll order that." So I bought This Naked Mind and I read it. and it was great. It gave me a lot of hope and it made sense to me. And I was still drinking. And I even remember like I got to the chapter towards the end where like, "Okay, now you're ready." And I'm like, "I'm not ready." I was scared, I was like, "Wait, I'm supposed to be ready." But along came the very first ever live alcohol experiment, January 1st, 2019, which I signed up for. And it was perfect timing because you can tell I was super motivated at that point to do something. So I signed up for the very first ever live alcohol experiment. And I haven't had a drink since.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. It's miraculous almost. And I didn't intend to stop. I mean, my goal when I joined the alcohol experiment was to get my drinking problem under control so that I could go back to drinking normally, right?
Right.
But after 30 days, I knew it wasn't enough. So I've been on every alcohol experiment that I think there's been 7, either as a mentor or I was hired to coach in November and January, which was amazing for me to go full circle, be able to participate, to give back what I received. But anyway, every group has formed an alumni group afterwards so that we can continue the relationships and continue their journey. So our alumni group from the January 2019 group is called AFAF. Maybe you might know what that means. And it was with those folks that I decided to just go through the experiment again. So do another 30 days, get back into the material. I think it's really useful to just, when you're doing a mindset shift, to just keep steeping yourself in that material. I give a lot of credit to my friend Jeremy because he took a real leadership role in that alumni group. And these groups exist because people show up for them, but leadership is good too. And I say that now, especially during this time of weirdness, like online is becoming so important. So I really encourage people to step out there and create communities or find communities because they can be really, really helpful, really supportive. I've made such good friends with the AFAF folks. In fact, 11 of us got together and met in New York City last August and spent a weekend together, and we had the best time. I mean, it was incredible. None of us knew. One woman came from Australia, a couple from Illinois, all over the country. And we didn't know what it would be like, but we had the best time. And I think just going through this journey and being vulnerable and honest with each other and understanding, creates really close bonds. So it was with them that I did the next 30 days. So I did 60 days, and my 60 turned into 100. My 100 turned into a year. And a year is a great amount of time to take off if you just are trying it, because you get to experience every season, every holiday, every, a year's worth of experience. And, my sobriety just got stronger and stronger due to the data that I was collecting. Oh, I can go to a concert and not drink. I can go out with my drinking friends and not drink and have a great time. So it was more that I continued to work on my mind shift. It wasn't just a function of time.
Right. Your internal data that you were having these experiences and
totally. And continuing to use the naked mind methodology to continue to strengthen my mindset and to look at every place. Is there any place where I'm still, feeling urges or whatever? Yeah, absolutely. So, I've had, so let the cat out of the bag there, but I am a coach now. But when I was starting out on that journey of to be a sobriety coach, I had some friends in AA tell me, or say to me, I think you should wait until you have a few years under your belt, as if that would make my sobriety stronger. And what I love about the naked mind methodology is my alcohol-free mindset is as strong now as it's going to be in 5 years, because that's the way the method works. I'm not going to get any, I have absolutely no desire to drink. I could take a shot of bourbon and do like this and go, smells good, and put it down, because I have no interest in it. I've actually done that. I just have no interest in drinking, which is, again, totally miraculous in terms of going from a place where I felt like I had a desperate desire to drink to, I have no interest in drinking.
Well, it's really one of the things I think that kind of cements that a little bit. Some of the science behind that is really fascinating. So it's really interesting that it has been obvious, like, that there's this correlation between how long you do a habit and how successful you might be. But what some new science is showing, and in the book Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, he really goes into this idea. And he's a scientist and a researcher at Stanford. And the idea is that, like, that is correlation. So there isn't any causation in that, the length of time and the success. It's correlated because obvious reasons, right? However, what actually is causal, so that where you look at something happening in somebody's life actually causing success over a long period of time, is emotion around the habit change, whatever that habit is, where it's drinking or social media or whatever the habit is. If you exercise, for example, if you're emotionally excited, or you join an exercise gym that gives you like a pat on the back and you feel really good afterwards, or you have endorphins, or you're doing it with a group of friends, or you're doing something where like you have high positive emotion associated with the habit, that is causal to actually have the habit last longer. Whereas just length of time is correlated, but it's not causal. And so I think that's really interesting, because it isn't. And when we think about like this naked mind, the process of education and the process that you've been through to become a certified This Naked Mind coach, like, it's really about deconstructing and understanding that the human brain and human beings, we will do what we want to do over the long term. We can force ourselves to do what we don't want to do over the short term. We all know this. We all have to go to the dentist. We all have to wake up, 2 a.m. with our babies. We have to do things that we don't want to do. I want to be eating cookie dough all the time, but I don't do it. But it is the things that we actually learn to want to do, to associate positive emotion with, that actually last, because then it becomes unconsciously competent, which means that you do it without even having, thought behind it. Right. And so that, I think, is so different. And that means that, like, what you're saying is actually scientifically true. It's much less about the length of time than it is about how you feel in the moment, like how you feel doing the habit. And so when many people, like during the alcohol experiment, it's a very positive experience. You're feeling good. You're making friends. I love that you guys all went to New York together, and I mean, there's these groups that are forming, and instead of feeling like, oh, this is a really negative, sad, shameful experience, an experience that I have to hide, it's like, no, this is an experience I'm really proud of. You have a concept that I love about just like it being a badass experience, frankly. So can you talk more about that?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, as a little sort of tagline that I'm playing with these days is alcohol free is the new badass, right? So So what do I mean by that? So we're all sort of inundated with messaging that says drinking is cool, right? From advertising, from our culture, like whatever that ad is, the most amazing man in the world, or or how many movies where a guy takes a shot before going into battle, or which is the stupidest thing you could possibly do. Oh, I'm going to put my life in the line. Let me dull my senses and and slow down my reflexes first. I mean, it makes no sense. Even Lord of the Rings. So when I was detoxing in January 2019, one of the things I did was I sort of set up my house to be my own personal rehab. I don't think rehab would have worked for me, because when I would have gotten out, I would have been in the same same circumstances. But I made my home into my own rehab, and I made it very comfortable. I changed up some routines, and one of the things I did during that time was I watched Lord of the Rings trilogy, because it was long and I loved it, and I watched like the special features, and night after night, not an hour here, an hour there. So I'm watching, and here comes this scene where our merry band of heroes is getting shit-faced. I mean, just getting smashed, and I never really thought about it before, but from this lens, I'm looking and going, there's Legolas, pouring down whatever he was drinking, just getting hammered, which is again saying this team of heroes, like maybe the most well-liked team of heroes in literature, is cool, and they're getting drunk. So I mean, we get that message. So I totally adopted that. I thought getting drunk was part of being cool, and bourbon was my drink, which is a nice, manly whatever drink. And I had my bourbon bottles like on my windowsill in college, and over time I started to adopt the idea that drinking made me a better person somehow. It made me more fun. It made me less inhibited, more engaged, more lively. I had great thoughts, and I did. I'm not going to pretend I didn't have great times drinking, and I was pretty high functioning, and I did have moments of brilliance even, I'm not going to pretend like that didn't happen. But the sad thing was I started to feel like I had to depend on drinking to be my best self, and like I mentioned before, I started to see these personality changes that I didn't like. In fact, I started to get feedback from friends that's like, maybe, like, I remember my friend, one of my oldest friends, Toby, said to me, I kind of miss the old Rob. And that really like hit me. I was like, oh, really? Because I was just assuming that this was the guy everyone liked. So what is a badass? I mean, for me, a badass is authentic, someone who has the courage to be themselves, someone who has the courage to take a stand on something. But what I learned over time was this drinking persona was anything but those things. Like I was a distorted version of myself. It wasn't the real me. And I kind of have William Porter to thank for this piece, because he wrote the book Alcohol Explained, and he talks about how, okay, for example, if you get angry and you're angry, and then your natural then propensity would be to calm down, like you don't stay angry. But alcohol takes the lid off that. So you don't just stop, you get angry and you stay angrier. And we've all seen this. We've seen really angry drunks. We've seen really sad, miserable people drinking. We've seen really happy. Like it's an intensifier, but it's a distorter. So when I read his book, I was so relieved, because it was like, wait a minute, this isn't the real me. This is a distortion of me. And so, in fact, since I've stopped drinking, I'm a much more authentic me. And I think that's really badass. I mean, just to be able to stand on myself, stand on my own. Another thing is I used alcohol to downplay my anxiety, and it, feeling like I'd be more badass if people didn't see how anxious I was. And it did numb it out. It numbed it out. But what I've realized now that I have a point of comparison is that I had all this anxiety running underneath the numbness. For example, what if I say something stupid? What if I forget what the person just said? What if I forget what the person just said told me? What if I black out, or get really drunk and fall down? What if I get stopped by the cops on the way home? What am I going to get to sleep tonight? What am I going to feel like in the morning? Why am I drinking so much? How, I had to hide like how much I was drinking, go sneak another shot. All that stuff is really anxiety producing. And now that I, again, have a point of comparison, like anxiety, I rarely ever get anxious anymore. I rarely ever get depressed. And I didn't know that would happen. My level of emotional balance is so great. And I'm thinking it's better than even before I became a problem drinker. Because even before I was a problem drinker, I still drank every week, most of my life. And alcohol can stay in your system for 10, 11 days easily. So, at least in terms of recovering from all the effects. So I never really gave myself a chance to experience this kind of balance. And now that I'm experiencing it, I wouldn't give it up for anything. It's way more, I'm way more healthier in my mind and a better version of myself than I ever thought I could be. And again, it feels almost miraculous.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol is artificial. It's a crutch, and I feel like every time I took a drink, because I wanted to be more courageous or funnier, I was sending myself, or sexier, whatever. I was sending myself a message that said, you're not enough. You need this thing. You need this extra thing, to really be your best self. But that was really sending a message that there's something wrong with me. So again, I feel like what's really badass is say, this is me. This is what you get. This is the real me. I'm, I do like going out drinking, not drinking, but with my drinking friends. And I'm sorry, drinking friends, but sometimes when I'm hanging out with them, I'm thinking to myself, my God, I could run circles around this person right now. I'm just so much more engaged. I'm so much more focused. My heart is open. I'm bound, and I just prefer this. It's like you said, in terms of going for what feels right or what we really want. This is what I really want now. I'm not white knuckling it. I'm not missing it. I mean, I miss it a little bit. I know there's certain experiences I won't have, but I had those and I know what they're like. And it's not a problem really giving those up in given that now this is what I have.
It's so awesome. It's so great.
Thanks.
It's very badass. That's awesome. I love it. So speaking of sort of social life and stuff, how has it been? Pretty good? Have you been able to, have people been annoyed or upset with the fact that you're not drinking, or has there been any ripple effects, or how's it been?
No, it's been really great. It's been really great. When I was drinking, I dreamed about someday being a person who could say, oh yeah, I had that problem and now it's gone, and who could be super open about it. And even like, I know when people first come on the alcohol experiment, they're hesitant to even post. Like, I don't want anyone to know. And I felt super ashamed. I even used to go around to different liquor stores because I didn't want the checkout person to see me coming multiple times. But clearly, I mean, over time and clearly then with my choice of career, I've gone completely the other way. I'm so open about it. But I've cultivated a total sense of non-judgment. I have absolutely no judgment about drinking, and I make sure people know that. And I don't, I can't, for one thing, because I drank too much. I know, I know what it's like. Plus, if I'm judging someone else, I feel like at some level I'm saying, I know how to run your life better than you, and I don't. All I can do is provide you with support and information, but I don't know what's best for you. Only you do. So most people really love to hear my story. Most of the time, the response I get is a surprising amount of the time I hear, oh yeah, I gave up drinking too recently. It's working out good for me. And, my friends that drink, I remember one friend said, he was like, oh, you still go drinking with us? Well, I'm like, yeah, I will. It's no problem. Anyway, to answer your question, already short story long, but it hasn't really been a problem,
Oh, that's so awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
So, so Rob, two final questions for you. Mm-hmm. And thank you so much. You are, first of all, well, actually 3 final questions, because I have another thing that I'm curious about, but you're a great storyteller. So I really appreciate that and sharing some of the details and the vulnerability, specifically with your daughter. How are things now?
Oh, fantastic. Really fantastic. It's odd because I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anybody. Like, I'm not going to advocate hey, develop a really strong dependence on alcohol, school of personal growth. But I don't think had I had I not gone through what I've been through, I don't think I'd be where I am right now. It's weird how the world works that way.
Absolutely.
And so with my daughter and I feel like we are way closer than we have ever been before, because part of it is because of this emotional balance and the sense that I am more authentic. I have less anxiety. I don't hold things back. I'm much more open with her. And so it's amazing. We're having just the best relationship. The same trip I went to New York, I spent some time with her too. And it was, we had the best time. One of the best conversations I've ever had in my life I had with her. So, and so yes, it's great.
Oh, it's just so awesome. That's so awesome. Yeah. So the second question, you're now a certified Naked Mind coach, and where can people find you?
Well, my company is called Recover Freedom, and I chose that name very consciously because, again, I don't feel like it's my job to tell people or even get people to stop drinking. My job is to help people get to a point where they have the freedom to make a choice. So I'm at recoverfreedom.org. Can I tell the story of how I became a coach, or are we out of time?
Course.
Oh, well, so I fell in love with the Naked Mind methodology. And when Annie rolled out a coaching program, I was curious and I thought, this sounds interesting. What's this about? So I'm talking about you, so I'm talking to the audience. So like, Annie recorded, because you're right here, Annie recorded a little short video to talk about what the program entailed and all about the program. So I'm watching this video. I'm thinking, okay, this sounds interesting. I don't know if I want to do it, but it looks interesting. And then about 3/4 of the way through, Annie says this. A couple of days ago, a client named Rob wrote me a note that said, I don't know what it would be like to be a person who has had such a huge impact on the lives of others, and in some cases maybe even saved people's lives. What I do know is that I'm one of your people, Annie, and as such, I will carry you in my heart till I die. I'll never describe this remarkable transformation I've achieved without thinking of you. So I'm watching Annie tear up as she's reading my testimonial, and I'm tearing up as I'm watching Annie tear up. And then I'm like, okay, forget it. Sign me up. Where is it? Give me the contract. Like you had me at whatever, it's like totally. And it's been one of the, if not the best decision I've ever made. The training was phenomenal, not just learning how to be a coach, but learning how to be a business owner. I love my job so much. It's, what drives me is I remember what it was like to feel like just miserable and at my wit's end, or just that there was something I had to do something about and I didn't know what. And the fact that I can be, that place to turn when people don't know where to turn is so gratifying. And it's so great that I work every day with people to help them, take steps and get to the point where they can choose to have the life that they want. It's amazing.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. And so, yeah, recoverfreedom.org. I'm at, Annie has been so generous in terms of the way she sets each of us up to do our own thing. We're not meant to be this Naked Mind clones. We each of us have a voice because Annie speaks about, we all know this is bigger than any one of us. So, she's generously made the videos from this Naked Mind alcohol experiment available for us to do our own. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing my own version of the alcohol experiment in partnership with this Naked Mind. And, I thought to myself, well, what can I add in terms of value? So, we're going to have classes. Well, I'm going to pick different topics. For example, nutrition or movement or relationships in alcohol or mindfulness. So just adding in additional material that will focus on those topics. Also, I'm going to have really good, great authors in the field speaking. Maybe you'll come one day, Annie. And also offer a free one-on-one coaching session. So just if you're interested, Rob, recoverfreedom.org, or email me at rob@recoverfreedom.org. Really excited about this, being able to provide the same kind of opportunity that I had.
It's so awesome. And one thing that I think is so neat, as I get to have the privilege of having hearing stories from people who, not only have gone through their own journey, but have now joined me in this and become, students of this Naked Mind Institute, is, there's so often this idea that we need to be fixed to heal. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, it is the wounded healer, you know, the one who's been there, who's been in it, the one who has the scars, who has the wisdom, that really gives us the hope. And hope is such a huge part of healing. And when you combine that with the knowledge and the science and the practicality, it's magical. And so I just appreciate you, Rob, so much. So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you the question I ask at the end of all of these things, which is if you were going to go back in time, especially to that Christmas when the presents were unopened, and you were just feeling so distant from your daughter and so upset, and you were going to tell Rob what life is like now for him, what would you tell him?
Well, here's what I would say. I mean, in terms of what life is like, well, okay, I got you. What I would say is, okay, this woman, Annie Grace, who's saying your life could be much better without alcohol, take what she's saying and multiply it exponentially, because your life is going to get so much better you can't even imagine it yet. And so trust that your life is going to be, you know, your emotional balance, your level of engagement, your level of confidence, your productivity, all these things, your relationships, all these things are going to improve exponentially. You know, that's what I'd say. I'd say, like, listen to her.
Just have some trust. Let me see if I can find, I literally just took this note at something else totally unrelated. And it was such a cool piece of advice. And it was basically, it said, we spend so much of our time, so much of our human brain trying to weigh what's right, what's true, is this like who, like, let's read some more reviews, let's wait a little bit of time, like, let's Google Rob 18 billion ways till Sunday to, you know, before we decide that we want to, you know, jump on board and come and work with him or whatever. And we spend so much time with this, like, what if it's right? What if this is true? And so the tool that I was given was listen and interact with what we're saying as if it's true. And just give yourself that freedom to take all the noise and be like, okay, if what I'm saying is true, and you can just take that leap of faith, which is exactly what you were telling former Rob of,
yeah.
What if it's true? What if it's true that everything you're looking for is just on the other side? Like, what if it's true
Right.
that actually it's your best life, not your worst life? What if it's true that it's never about missing out? It's actually about being so grateful that you're not where you were anymore. What if it's true that all the things you thought you were getting, you actually get tenfold elsewhere? What if it's true that you're trading this very shallow existence? I always like to say, you know, an existence of getting drunk all the time is really actually homogenous, because it feels the same to be drunk on Christmas as it does at a concert, as it does in front of Netflix, right? And so you're numbing down the human experience and the human emotion. And what if it's true that actually when you let that go, you have this rich, vibrant, yes, you have downs, but you have ups, and they're so beautiful. And just like, again, like, listen and interact, maybe with this podcast, maybe with Rob's alcohol experiment, as if what we're saying is true, and give yourself permission to put down the judgment for a minute. And what do you have to lose? You come out, you take a leap of faith. It's not true. You can write us a letter. Be like, no, I'm so upset that I stopped drinking. It was the worst decision I ever. That's never happened, by the way. I've never received that letter.
No. And what if it's true is a way better question than, oh, what are all the reasons why it might not be true?
Yeah.
You know, I just find that
it's such a more empowering question.
Such a more empowering question. And I love what you said about brokenness, because this, I actually, you know, I have a fantastic therapist, and we had a session remotely the other day on Zoom, but he said, like, this whole thing about once I pass the test or once I win the game, then I'll be accepted and I'm okay, is that's like for a young person, you know, that's like when you're in school. And his point was like growing up and learning to be your own parent, for lack of a better metaphor, is about recognizing that, sure, play the game to win, but don't confuse the results with the, like, you could say we're broken, but we're really not broken. I mean, we've had difficult situations, especially if we've drank. It's easy to beat yourself up, but it's like, no, you know, it's like you did what you did, and here you are. You know, you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to win anything. You don't have to make anything up. In fact, you can't. The past is gone. Just being yourself and sharing that with others. You know, I think that's the key. It sounds kind of simple, but that's the key.
It's so good. I mean, it really brings to mind like this idea I've been toying around with, that the best games are the games that there is no winning. Like the game of life, the game of business, the game of relationships, the game of health. Like you're never going to be like, okay, now the score is this, I'm done, I'm going to stop playing. And actually, if you look at games in general, there's so much depression the day after winning a Super Bowl from the very people that just won it, right?
Wow.
And the year after winning a Super Bowl, right? Because you've achieved the thing. And so actually moving from the games to win and the goals to win and these future gates and these to saying, oh, wow, I'm just playing for the sake of the game. I'm just here. I love the quote by Thich Nhat Hanh. I always say that. I never know if I'm saying it right.
You're close.
How is it?
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh. Thank you.
There you go.
The quote is, I am here, I have arrived. My destination is in each step. And for me, like that's as someone who is very driven toward achievement and toward the next thing, as all humans are, but some of us have it, I think, in spades, to just be like, no, this right now, this is the game. And it's worth playing, but it's not to win, it's to play, right?
Yeah. I love that you said that, because I've actually adopted that as one of my mantras. I have arrived, I have arrived. But so many of my sweet friends that have known me for decades, they keep saying, oh, but you've been here all along. Like, this is the you I've always experienced, which has just been so affirming to me. So
that's so cool. Well, Rob, you're amazing. You've been a bright light for me too. And in your gratitude and just in getting to know you through the coaching program and especially today and sharing your story, it's been really special.
This has been great. Thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate it so much.
And I hope to see you soon in one form or another.
Yay. Okay, for sure.
Anyway,
all right.
Take care, everybody. Be well, everybody.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye. If you asked me about the one thing that makes this Naked Mind so different from anything else, I would have to say emotion. It is the emotion that people feel when they're really ready to make a change, when they've had that mindset shift, when they've gone through all the materials and the methodology, and they get this feeling that it's not that they never get to drink again, it's that they never have to drink again. And interestingly, according to all sorts of new research, it is emotion, especially positive emotion, more than anything else that predicates how long a change will stick, how long it will last. It is emotion. When you feel excited about the change in your life, when you feel thrilled that you're making this new difference, instead of feeling deprived or like you're missing out, everything changes. And it really makes it that this Naked Mind can stick for the long term. If you want to know more about how to truly change your emotion around drinking, I want you to join me at nakedmindpath.com. It is the path to changing your emotion, changing your feelings, and really finding freedom in your relationship with alcohol. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.